Good evening, everyone. This is the Ward 3 NPA. Thank you for coming along. Thank you for coming down. It is 6:31, so we are calling into attendance. All in favor of proceeding, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I am Zachary Cummings, one of the steering committee members, and we have Christopher Aaron Felker on Zoom. He is another one of our steering committee members. And Chris Hazley briefly stepped out to go pick up the pizza order. I guess to move along, we will go to the first item of the agenda, City Council updates being presented by Mark Barlow, City Councilor from the North District.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks for inviting me to the Ward 3 NPA again.
Thank you, Colonel.
So tonight I was asked to come and talk about the unaccepted streets issue that's been working its way through the TUC anyways, and ultimately it will work its way through the city council. But essentially in November, DPW came to the TUC with a memo saying that they wanted to formalize their policy about unaccepted and private streets. And there are currently in the city of Burlington 55 total streets, 32 private streets, and 23 unaccepted streets. Private streets are things like you might imagine, they're part of condo associations, everything, and they're less of an issue generally. Although there are a few that we may want to formalize relationships with. But the 23 unaccepted streets are streets within the city of Burlington that that many of the residents on those streets actually think are city streets, and they have never been formally accepted by the city for various reasons. And so the Department of Public Works would like us to formalize our obligations to those streets. And so they came with a memo to TUC first in November, and we had a bunch of questions and asked them to give us a map and a list by ward, because they brought an alphabetized list, and they came back with that in December, and we talked about it some more. And so within Ward 3, there's really very few. I was just looking at them. I think there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 streets. And I'll name them for you: Lawson Lane, Markham's Lane, Mechanics Lane, which I think are all like
On this block.
in this general downtown core area. There's also something called Sunset Court and Bolt Street. I'm gonna admit that I don't know where either one of those are, but they're all in Ward 3. And the city does various things on Bolts and on Sunset. The city plows. But there's a number of these streets. So there's very few in Ward 3, but there's a number throughout the city. Where TUC is at right now, the councilor, I can speak for all the TUC members and maybe for some of the other city councilors as well, although not for all of them, is that we really need to look at these streets one by one and see, of the 23 unaccepted streets, are there streets that we could accept without bringing them up to current city engineering standards, because many of them were built long before we have the current set of standards. And so to understand what the deficiencies are, or what the risks would be with bringing any of these streets up. So my personal view, and I think I can speak for other members on the committee, is we'd like to see a more individualized process for these streets, and not, as the memo had suggested, a date certain by which we would have some policy and start to stop providing services without formal agreements on these streets. And so that's where things are at, and I'm happy to take questions. There's probably more coming on this in the month of January and beyond. But I think it's fair to say that we won't be abandoning these streets in any way, shape, or form in October of 2026, as the original memo suggested. We would have to have an agreement by which, and before we would stop providing services. So that's where it's at. And I don't know if anybody, it's been a hot topic in the New North End. I can tell you that there was a bunch of streets, and during that last ice storm, when everybody was complaining about the service level on their streets, we were getting calls from folks who were saying, "You've already stopped plowing my street." It's like, no, we have it. It's just an ice storm, and DPW is behind. So that's where things are at.
For the home, where is this memo published? Is it published in
Um,
the two committee?
yes.
Or DPW?
There's two different, actually, there is, this memo is, they're actually on the DPW website, that they have information about private unaccepted streets there, and there's a URL, which I'm not going to read, but I'm gonna refer people to the DPW section. But also, if you're on Civic Clerk, you could look at the agendas for either Transportation, Energy and Utilities Committee meeting in November or December, and you would see December is the most updated memo. But all this information would be on the DPW page of the city website as well.
And we have a question.
So just approach the microphone, please. Or take it with you or.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that for people who've been reaching out, just reach out to your city councilor and we can mail you the links directly. I've been already talking to some people on Volt Street, and there are three other streets in Ward 3 that are of a concern in terms of losing city services. The other smaller, they're not even really streets. They're what we call lanes in Ward 3. I'm going to walk through them again, and I'm going to talk to property owners along Lawson Lane as well. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Do you have any other questions or comments for Councilor Barlow? Yeah, all right. If that's usually that's concluded as a piece of.
Yeah, that's all I have for you.
All right, thank you. Well, now we'll move on to our next item, being Councilor Ally Schechter from the East District.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. For those I haven't met, I'm Ally Schechter. I assume this is on and I don't have to do anything. Okay. I represent the East District Wards 1 and 8, and I also serve on the Community Development and Neighborhood Revitalization, or the CDNR committee. And this summer, the CDNR committee was worked on and then presented a syringe litter report that was brought back to council in October. The start of it was last fall. I believe there was a memo brought forward to the Board of Health, our local Board of Health, asking us to sort of take a look at what's happening with syringes in our community. The Board of Health brought forward some recommendations and a report. The CDNR committee took it up and spent the summer having really in-depth conversations with a variety of community stakeholders and content experts and local syringe service providers to think about how do we manage the fact that we have syringe litter in our community. I think we've all witnessed it to varying degrees. And so thinking about how can we take some actionable steps to address it. I also want to acknowledge that Teresa Vizina is on this call, who is the I don't know I'm blanking on your specific title, Teresa, but works really hard on helping to implement the Overdose Prevention Center and that work, that has spent much of her career working in syringe service management and other related services. So Teresa is here in case any questions come up. So I wanted to just kind of at a very high level talk about some of what we did in the committee and some of the recommendations in the report, and then I'm glad to answer any questions. So at a high level, we dug deep. We mostly worked with, so there's 3 syringe service providers in this community who serve a really critical purpose of handing out clean syringes to folks who are dealing with substance use disorder, prevents disease, all sorts of public health benefits. And through this process, and we primarily worked with Howard Center, who has a facility on Clark Street, and has sort of garnered a lot of the most media attention around what they do. And I also do believe they are the sort of largest, serving the most people, SSP in the community. And so we worked with them. We dug into some of the data. Some of it made the news. It was pretty highly circulated WCAX article, with the headline being that we are talking about needles entering our community in the hundreds of thousands. And I think we feel that and we know that. And again, they serve a really important purpose. How can we be better managing that as a city and sort of addressing the litter? So just to give you a sense of the numbers. So in 2024, about 944,000 needles were dispensed out of the Howard Center location on Clark Street, and just over 500,000 were returned. And then, so that's about a 55% return rate. And then in 2025, 457,000 were dispensed as of when this was presented to us this summer. And about 370,000 had been returned, which was an 81% return rate. So that's moving in a positive direction. And I know that all of our SSPs are working hard to provide education around safe needle disposal, whether it's returning it back to an SSP or disposing of it safely in the community. But also we're a small community, and so these are large numbers and we do feel it. And so what else can we be doing as a community? So our main recommendations centered around a couple big buckets, and I can get into each of them. One was data collection. Are we actually really tracking this data in a way to understand the true both scale and extent of the issue, but also when we are improving this issue, are we tracking it in such a way where we can notice that? And one example is, hopefully many of you are familiar with SeeClickFix, the online reporting tool that the city operates. Right now, you can submit a report that you see a pile of syringes, but there's no way to say how many. So we actually, on the city level, we can track, and it's even kind of manual, I think, to track how many syringe litter reports we get, but we're not actively doing a great job of saying, and okay, is it 1 needle? Is it 100 needles? Is it 500 needles? So there's certain recommendations within the report around thinking about data collection and tracking that I think will help us better understand when we're moving the needle on the issue and what that looks like. We talked about, and the Board of Health had brought this forward, and we really support thinking about more safe disposal boxes across the community in really strategic locations. And so they've already made some investments there, and we support sort of continuing to think about how to make safe disposal accessible and available and centrally located for where sort of the hotspots are in the community. We also talked a bit about volunteer engagement, and that there's great groups, including PJC. Maybe you've heard about the Thursday morning syringe litter walks. I bet some of you have done them. We have lots of great people stepping up and helping to clean up the syringes in the community. What we don't have right now is sort of a standardized way to say sort of like who's in charge of what area, or how are we sort of standardizing how they're being collected. And is it being done in a safe way with the right equipment and the right training to make sure that the folks who are doing this are well equipped? And we think that there's a role to play both at the city level and in partnership with the state to sort of make there be a more centralized volunteer process for handling syringe litter. And Teresa, I'd love to invite you into the conversation in a minute to talk about, if you're comfortable, some of the work. I know Teresa's been convening a Sharps litter working group, I think maybe you call it, of both city and state folks and service providers to really come together and talk about how to kind of provide a more collaborative, centralized response to some of what we're dealing with. And then there was some deep conversation around like ways to be working with the state who are funding SSPs to make sure that sort of the protocols that are in place, particularly around needle disbursement and return and the education that folks are getting. Another finding from this report was just that the referral rate to treatment for the folks who are accessing services at the Safe Syringe program is very, very low. It's in like the 3 to 4% range. So there was a conversation of how can we be also making more service connections, making that be a bigger part of what these providers are doing, and where is the role of the state who's sort of helping to stand up and support these programs in thinking about that piece of it, the sort of real root cause, like how do we sort of break these cycles of substance use disorder that folks are experiencing. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to take questions. And I also, Teresa or any of my fellow counselors, if anyone wants to step in and add anything before we open the floor.
I'm happy to.
Please, Teresa, feel free.
Hi, I'm sorry, my camera isn't working. I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so first, thank you, Kelly, for sharing the update on the report. All the things that I learned for the feedback really good. I wanted to give an update on the work that we are doing with the state as one of the recommendations of the many good recommendations in the report was to coordinate with the Department of Health and the so we are going to be working collaboratively with AHS and our grant manager there who oversees the syringe service programs in the state and also happens to be our grant manager for the Overdose Prevention Center grant that I am working on. And we're really excited about this because it sort of brings all the players to the syringe working group that we sort of had been meeting in a formal way since June, and that includes PJC and Safe Recovery. We've invited in Vermont Cares and Vermonters for Criminal Justice Reform, VCJR. And now we also have our state representative there with us from the health department. This will help us to really formalize even more of the work that we've been doing, that including the way that we structure the volunteer part of this work and ensure that community-based organizations like our syringe service programs are a key sort of backbone organizations to the way that we not only do the syringe cleanup, but also the way that we train, provide the proper materials and disposal options as well. So I'm really excited to share that our first sort of large group meeting will be happening next week. And one thing I did want to say about the data points that you shared earlier, Allie, is to take into consideration that even though close to 1 million syringes were distributed and that 2024 data is showing a little bit lower return rate, what's not included there are all of the syringes that are actually disposed of through household trash methods, which are the recommended disposal from the health department. So many of our syringe service program participants are actually educated and encouraged to dispose of their syringes in coffee containers, old laundry soap containers, right in their household trash per the health department recommendations. So it is hard to have an exact number for syringe service programs for syringes that don't come back to their program. But they are collecting the data of the syringes that are directly being disposed of back at their programs. But there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of syringes that are being properly disposed of that are unaccounted for. So I just want to point out the only accurate number we have on improperly disposed syringes are the ones that are actually improperly disposed of. So those numbers, while C-Click Fix doesn't have a quantity yet, the anecdotal numbers are much, 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 much lower than the hundreds of thousands of improperly disposed of syringes that data point sort of is leading people to believe. So I just wanted to be really clear in making that point, and that there is a very big investment in education for syringe service program participants to return syringes. And I know that increased efforts have been being made, and I think that's evident in the return rates increasing in the 2025 data that's being shown. And we hope that through this volunteer work group that we're doing, we're also really looking at how we can involve participants of the SSP in the work that we're doing and have them join our volunteer groups. And the reality is people do want to be a part of the solution. And so if we can help provide different avenues and options and opportunities, not only for people who are living and working in Burlington, but who are also using the syringe service program, we really think this can be a really empowering and positive experience for everyone. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to do this work from the city level. Thanks.
Teresa, there has been a request for you to just, again, share your name and perhaps your title at the city for folks who didn't catch it.
Yes, Teresa Vizina, and I am currently the special assistant to the mayor's office on the implementation of the Overdose Prevention Center.
Um, I was gonna say, yes, I was gonna ask if anybody in the audience has any questions but
Well,
there you go, Susie. Susie.
so there are several things that I want to address here.
Stand or sit?
You need a mic.
Okay. So several things that I want to address because I am on the streets pretty much every morning picking up needles and one thing is the amount of needles that are in the packages that are given out seem to be excessive because I end up picking up those packages where maybe one or two needles were taken out and then the rest were abandoned. Second of all, the places that I believe that we desperately need mountings of places where people can dispose of needles is at the bus stop on Pearl Street. That's where I pick up a huge amount of needles. The wall maybe across from the Daily Planet, there's a lot of needle action there, and in every parking garage in Burlington. I don't know if they're there now, but that's my 2 cents about that.
So helpful, Susie. We'll have to get you connected to the Sharp Slitter Working Group. Your service to the city is remarkable, so thank you.
Do you have any other questions? Okay.
Was going to say, I don't know how they get their needles or where from, but well, in New York, it was impossible to get needles unless you had a card saying you were a diabetic or something. Which of course made a lot of people use the same needle. But if they're using sterile needles, are they not exchanging them for ones that they have used?
That is correct. The current SSPs are not needle exchanges, which would be a one-to-one exchange. They are set up to be syringe service providers, there's not that expectation that you would only get what you bring in. And my understanding there, and Teresa and others feel free to weigh in, is just that it's from a public health standpoint, there's much higher use of the services without that expectation of the one-to-one return, which has major public health impact for the folks who are in need of these needles. So it's not been set up to be a one-to-one exchange, to my knowledge. And I'm sure I'm not presenting this as gracefully as one who's steeped in this work, but these are not needle exchanges, and that has been clearly communicated to me.
Has it been tried, or does it just not work and people can't get into it? I mean, it's free needles.
Teresa, are you able to weigh in at all here with your expertise? Like why are they set up to be not that one-to-one exchange model? I get this question a lot.
Yeah, there is a lot of evidence-based research that shows that one-for-one exchange programs are not best practice and can actually inhibit the good public health work that is done at syringe service programs, especially when it becomes prohibitive for a person that needs a sterile syringe and something has happened and they don't have a sterile syringe, a used syringe to return. It forces people into potentially having to reuse non-sterile syringes because they don't have access to a sterile syringe. So I could point to many peer-reviewed reports on the non-benefits of one-for-one exchange. I think, speaking just from my experience in working in syringe service programs, even though it's not mandatory to do a one-for-one exchange, I think it is not true that we as syringe service providers are not encouraging and recommending to people to how to safely dispose of syringes. That happens all of the time at all exchanges. We still call them exchanges from the, just the terminology of that we still sometimes use, even though it's not a one-for-one exchange, it still is many, many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands. I'd gather to say millions of syringes are returned back to syringe service programs every year. So even though it's not considered a one-for-one, it still does have a very strong component of bringing back syringes for disposal. Every syringe service program provides every different sizes of sharps containers, from small 10 container ones to larger quarts and 5 gallons. And so there is a genuine part of syringe service programs that does educate and provide information and materials to properly dispose. And again, let's go back to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of syringes being returned back to programs just in Burlington. And so across our state, we're looking at millions.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you, Mila Grant, Central District City Councilor. The other reminder that I would like to mention about these programs is that when we talk about harm reduction, it's harm reduction for the community as a whole. And one of the reasons that these programs are so crucial is that when people reuse needles and share needles, that increases the transmission of certain viruses, such as hepatitis B, C, and HIV. And having these type of programs minimizes that and helps to avoid a secondary health emergency. We, by the use of these programs, have managed to avoid those secondary emergencies. So when we think about our first responders, when we think about people in the public who might come across and accidentally get stuck with a needle, this is very, very important. We can look at states such as West Virginia and Indiana, states with a lot of rural communities that did not have these type of programs and ended up with significant transmission of those viruses that I mentioned. So that's the other thing that we have to keep in mind about how it helps all of us within our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Brooks, go ahead. So you can proceed with your question. All right, well, if he doesn't hop on, I'm going to move on to the next segment. Do you have any questions, any more questions in the audience? Okay. Well, for that to be on schedule, I'm going to close up this portion of the meeting. Thank you, Councilor Schachter. And we will be going on to, oh gosh, where is the agenda? I believe we have the farmers market with Georgie Rubens to be presenting.
Hi, that's me.
Oh, hi.
Probably swing over to the right of Zach.
Yeah, this is actually a better angle for the camera.
Oh, this one?
All right.
Oh, hi. Yeah, so I was just invited here today by Chris, who came to one of a tour that we hosted at the farmers market this summer to celebrate National Farmers Market Week. And he mentioned that there's been interest within this ward to host a farmers market downtown again. And it's something that we've definitely heard consistently since we moved to Pine Street. While a lot of our customers really enjoy that location, we know that the downtown market is really missed. And so we're, I guess, just really open to hearing from the community and curious what everyone wants. And I guess one thing I will just mention is I don't know how widely known this is, but the farmers market is actually a member-run organization. And so we have certain vendors who govern the farmers market. And so it's a little bit tricky because everything we do has to be in the benefit of the membership for us to be able to sell anything new. So that's kind of a lens that we're always thinking about. But we obviously are really steeped in the community. We want to serve the community. We want to support our local businesses, local ag, and obviously feed our community. So just really open to hearing from everyone and anyone.
Georgie, could you kindly give us some background of like how the farmer's market moved from downtown over to its current location and like what the process was and the level of involvement of the farmer's market in that process? Just like a more context and background as to how we got to where we are today.
Yeah.
You might be aware.
Yeah, and I will say, so I've only been with the farmers market for about, I'm going into my 4th year with the market, so I actually wasn't part of it when that move happened. But I can give you my high level impression and what I've learned through my time. But essentially, my understanding is that the market was based in City Hall Park since the 1980s. And then City Hall Park was renovated, which meant that the farmers market had to move while those renovations happened. And then during that time, I know there were some discussions around how the market was going to fit into the newly designed City Hall Park. And I think for whatever reason, the end result of the design, it meant it wasn't really appropriate for our size anymore. We were no longer able to fit the number of vendors safely into City Hall Park as it's designed now. And so during that time, we obviously found our location at 345 Pine Street, and dealer.com sublease us their space there. And it's kind of worked out and been easier for a number of our vendors from like a logistical standpoint. And given the space constraints of City Hall Park, for now staying in or at Pine Street has kind of been our best option. Yeah.
I had a question about the affordability. And what I'm saying is like before the park was renovated, the farmers market was very homogeneous, is the only way I can put it. And when I talked to vendors of color that was at the other farmers market across town, they said they couldn't afford to be downtown. So I was just wondering, when we move back downtown, what's it going to cost for people, that don't have a lot of money to be part of the farmers market?
Yeah, I hadn't heard that before, so I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, my answer is I don't know. And also I will say we don't have any set plans to move downtown. I also know that we are doing a lot to try and support vendors who can't afford to be at the market. So actually this last year, we've just started piloting a program for our agriculture vendors who can apply for subsidized base fees if they meet certain criteria. But we're definitely trying to do more of that. Yeah, we're actually this year participating in an anti-racist farmers market training, and I'm really hopeful we'll be able to incorporate a lot of that learning into whatever we do, wherever we are located. Yeah.
Thank you.
I am old. I live in a building which BHA ran. Now it's a little disabilities and elderly, but it was chiefly an elderly building. And we have many elderly people, and I am as old as Trump. I am old. I look a little better. But the thing is, no one will go out Pine Street. Way too far. And with the gravel situation this last summer, it was a total washout. But I have never seen any of my neighbors out there, whereas they could all get to City Hall Park. And so you're throwing away all the old people if you keep it all out there.
Yeah, I hear this and I hate, and this is a universal, this is something that my entire steering committee, we all agree on, that the current location is so far from being accessible. And it's really problematic. There are long-term plans in place. Like ultimately what we're trying to do is acquire space somewhere large enough where we could build a purpose-built space for a farmer's market with all of the accessibility considerations in mind. But no, it sucks. And it's something that we try and grade the lot. We try and do what we can, but ultimately there's just limitations on what we can do with the space. And so I think, yeah, maybe doing something at City Hall Park or a smaller version that could complement our existing market, like, yeah, all is.
Wall Street
Yeah.
nearby,
Yeah.
adjacent, any area adjacent. Anyway, they can get there. They cannot get out Plant Street. Many.
Yeah. Well, also, I will say we launched a foundation last year, and that's we're still sort of forming a lot of the basic governance stuff, but part of that is hopefully trying to apply for more grants that could be used, for example, to partner with I think it's SSTA to maybe provide transportation down Pine Street, which again, it doesn't solve the gravel, so there's limitations, but we're definitely trying to move in that direction to increase accessibility where we can. So I'm really sorry.
Susie.
One of the things that do I have to get on the mic?
Yeah, you got a mic.
Oh. So. Sorry about that.
Even though I'm old, the thing about the farmer's market downtown in the park, it was so charming. It was Vermont. It just felt like Vermont. And when you guys moved down to Pine Street, I've never been once to the farmer's market, and I used to go not because it was close, but because it was so charming and felt like Vermont. So I hope some of you move back there, because I really think it makes a difference.
We all love grass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I have a question for myself. Has there been consideration for opening up a secondary market and during the midweek?
Yeah, I mean that idea has definitely been posed. I was here in this building earlier today meeting with the Love Burlington team, just because we've been trying to collaborate more ever since the market did move away, and that was an idea that we discussed and have some definite next steps to kind of brainstorm and see if that's something that there would be any traction for. So yeah, maybe. Never say never. Oh, am I allowed to do that?
Waterfront Park, bigger. And I think one problem that the Pine Street has is it's all gravel. In this summer, it's extremely hot with reflection. And I think that I think the grass is important, and if it's spread out more, it wouldn't be trampled down so much. So it could maybe spread out if you used a bigger park. I think City Hall Park is simply not big enough, but I think you could use Waterfront Park, possibly.
Yeah, possibly. Last I checked on that idea, there was some issues with BTV parks on the trampoline. It has been a couple of years since pursued that, but
We readdressed because
Yeah.
I think many people are frustrated with the Pine Street location.
yeah.
Anybody else? Chris?
So I think one of the, I think people covered a lot of the ground here, the comments, and I think as someone who actually lives in the downtown within close proximity of City Hall Park, it was, I think as Susie said, it was kind of charming, but it was also kind of our social hub. It's where we would come and socialize and meet with people. We don't really have a lot of those types of events here in downtown, and the loss of that was, I think, felt pretty solidly throughout the community and reverberated there. But I had also heard that at some point that as friends were looking, I thought I'd heard that there was a waiting list to get into the Pine Street location, but is that no longer the case because it's a bigger space or?
Yeah, so that is actually such a big misconception. And I think, so essentially the way the market works with bringing in vendors is we are an ag first market. And so the size of the market at this point is constrained by the number of ag applicants we have. So we are required to be, or we are required to make our very best effort to be at least 50% agriculture, at the market. So 50% of frontage on any given day needs to be agriculture vendors. Every year, the last essentially 3 years, I would say, we've been slowly, the number of ag applicants has been dwindling for various reasons. Land access, being forced to move, big weather events, etc. There's like all these things that we all know make it difficult to farm in the state. So we've actively been trying to recruit more ag vendors, and this like subsidy program and giving new ag vendors the possibility to apply for grant funding is one way that we're trying to make it more attractive for farmers to come to market. So that is like the biggest constraint. The prepared food and craft are the other two categories. So those are the three categories, how we think about the makeup of the market as a whole. Those two categories generally are more competitive, and there can be a wait list to some extent, but it really depends on the year. And every year we're kind of discussing as a group, the steering committee looks down at the applications and we'll say, okay, are we trying to, like, how many vendors from last year are we bringing back? What does that get to? Where do we get to with looking at the market as a whole? And then beyond that, it's kind of, do we want to invite lots of new vendors to rotate through? Do we want to give a few vendors like a really good shot at making an impact in the market by being here consistently? Like all of these things kind of feed into who we invite and how many people, and therefore what that like wait list looks like. But I will say, I don't think we've had a significant wait list. Not in my time at the market, which is so 3 years at least.
Do you have a sense if there's any current vendors that may be interested in potentially relocating to the downtown, or is everyone pretty much like, we love our space down on Pine Street?
Yeah, it's something I would really like to ask the vendors. I know for a lot of our farmer vendors, it's a big lift coming to set up in the city. And staffing is really challenging and it's time consuming, and that I think is the biggest, that's kind of, we have to get the farmers in order to have the market, right? And so I've asked 1 or 2, it's just kind of on the side, just check out the vibe. And there's definitely been hesitation, but I have not asked widely. And I think that's something that I really would like to ask. I want to do it in the right way because I don't want to ask in a way, like I don't want people to have a knee-jerk reaction and just say, no, that sounds scary. So I think having a plan in place and kind of a vision for what it could look like could be really helpful for kind of assessing the appetite for it, is my guess.
So taking into consideration all of the different questions and perspectives that have been shared thus far tonight, it sounds like there's a couple of things here going on. Yes, there's an interest, like the community would love to have the farmers market come back, but it also has to work and make sense for the farmers market. And initially, I think folks were thinking, well, if there's a wait list, maybe we could, set up a satellite market and expand the footprint, so to speak, and, kind of complement the one on Pine Street, because I think, there's something to be said for the Pine Street. It's bigger space. I mean, there are some accessibility challenges, as I think as some folks have recognized, but, I think the community down in the South End would similarly feel upset if it were to leave. And, we're not looking to replace it, I don't think, but looking to complement it. So from your perspective, like what would be like the next steps to kind of continue this conversation? Because it sounds like, based on my experience and some of the comments we heard here, it sounds like there's definitely some interest in making it happen, but like there's some things that need to be figured out.
Yeah, and it's so funny because this is kind of the conversation I had earlier today. I think a lot of it is figuring out what, like when I think about the conversation I'm going to have with my steering committee, one of whom might be on Zoom. So if he is, hello, Ben. But it's just figuring out how can I pitch this to my steering committee in a way that it's really attractive for the market. And so for us, is it serving our vendor community by providing additional sales opportunities, which I think, I mean, given, you know, we all know it's a tough economic time, like maybe that right now is actually a really good thing, because maybe some businesses are looking for additional sales opportunities. So I think thinking about that, considering what infrastructure the city can provide, and then obviously it would need to bring in some form of revenue for the farmers market. Like that would have to be something that we'd have to think through. So yeah, I just think pitching.
I thought possibly, I think it's BCA that puts on the crafts shows and festivals. You could combine BCA with a modified farmers market craft show and the farmers market on Pine Street all on the weekend, and people can just go back and forth, and you know, we could have both spaces for community.
Susie, if you want to.
What about moving, like making it like a flower market downtown? So that you didn't move everybody, but it made like a flower market.
Yeah.
You know, and plants, because it would be something, and maybe a few food trucks where not everybody had to move, but it would be a place where people, because most Vermonters love to go buy flowers and plants in the summertime. It'd be lovely.
Yeah, so joyful. It would be joyful. We love being joyful. Yeah. I think, yeah. And I mean, when I was speaking about it with the Love Burlington team, we were kind of thinking, like, if we were to do something this summer, what could we do in a way that's kind of a low lift pilot that would be set up in a way that is successful and proves the case to maybe build on it in future years. So what is like the smallest version we could do that might be like a good test? I think that's like a smart place to start potentially.
Pilot.
With a pilot, yeah.
So kind of circling back to some of your earlier comments at the beginning of the discussion about the design and how the current park didn't lend itself to a farmer's market. Sounds like, you know, maybe that now that the park's finished, there may be some way to adapt that. But based on the current configuration of the park and the possibility that maybe we could continue to utilize a portion of St. Paul Street as had been done previously, like what would you think would be a reasonable number on a pilot program? Are you talking like 6 vendors, 8, 10, 12?
Yeah, I think 5 to 10. I think it really depends on having those. I think we need a couple of keystone agricultural vendors. And I think 5 to 10 could be a really good place to start. Yeah.
And so aside from, you know, showing up to support the farmers market in its current configuration at Pine Street, like what can the community do to continue to show support and to maybe help move this along?
Come to the farmers market. Come and visit us. And I think, I mean, reach out. You can, all channels lead to me. But you can go on our website, email me your interest. I think that's really helpful for me, building a case of support to present to our board. And then I think also just keep showing up to these meetings and expressing interest, because we ultimately, it really does come down to, does this make sense? How are our members benefiting from this? And so we need to like prove that case, and that means people need to show up and they need to make it worthwhile for vendors to be there. And I think that's yeah. I think
Sense.
if anyone's good at logistics and wants to hop in.
Yeah, because I think, we talk about community, I think about the folks here in downtown, the businesses, and I know a lot of the folks in the area immediately around definitely felt the effects of it. Some of the people, like, oh yeah, we used to get a lunch bump, with the farmer's market, and we don't have that on Saturday anymore. And I know that the marketplace merchants appreciated because it brought people into the downtown in a positive way. And it utilized the park for what it was intended as opposed to, what it's being used for in recent times. So yeah, I think it'd be helpful if, to continue the conversation and, just send people to you then and be like, hey, we support the farmer's market, and see if the numbers work to make it worth the while then.
Yeah, and I think also just, I mean, for us, it's like we need to having data, like when are the busiest times at City Hall Park? Like, what do people want? Is it a lunchtime market? Is it an after work market? I think it's definitely if we did anything, it would have to be a weekday. But just those kinds of decisions. And
so putting on 2 simultaneous markets on a Saturday or a Sunday probably would be a little challenging, sounds like, logistically.
yeah, that would be a much heavier lift for us at this point. Yeah.
That would be the ideal if we could do that, though. Because we could all go back and forth.
When Miro had the genius idea to put a diagonal slab of concrete from the back of Reroz to the TD Bank at the corner of St. Paul and Main. Well, I tried to point out that didn't follow a traffic pattern and that no one uses it, and they still don't. But one of the chief complaints about the farmer's market was that they ruin the grass. So if you could have the market on that gigantic diagonal slab of concrete, that would help activate the park in a good way. And if you said we have to be careful of the grass, and they had some alternative places to sit down, it might work. It might help. I mean, the renovations were supposed to help.
Just wondering if any of our elected officials have any thoughts on the matter that would like to weigh in.
Thank you. I would just say if there are challenges for farmers that you had mentioned in trying to set up in the downtown, if that's something the city can help with, like making more space along the park available or something, that could be part of the conversation during setup times and tear down times.
Yeah, I just want to echo that I would be very supportive of exploring ways to bring part, or if not all, of the farmers market into some of our downtown. I think there's a lot of potential patrons and customers who may not even realize what's happening over on Pine Street on a Saturday, but are in our downtown, or, the weekdays, summers. Like, there's so much happening that I think it would really contribute to the vibrancy of our downtown if there was a way to do it. So like Mark, I echo Councilor Barlow. That if there are barriers and there's something, like, please keep us in the loop and aware, because there might be ways that we can help to address them.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
One location I haven't heard yet, unless I was like out of the room or something, but Church Street, like, what have been logistical or policy challenges between the farmers market and the city on, well, having a farmers market on the designated pedestrian mall that the city does have?
Yeah, so again, this idea, I've spoken about this with the Love Burlington team, I believe. I could be, or I can't, honestly, I may not have been the Love Burlington team. But I know there was some concern around downtown businesses feeling like the market would outcompete them. And so I find with my experience with small business owners has been, there's always this like balance between attracting customers and detracting from sales. And so I think every business would have their own opinion on if having a farmer's market outside their front door would be helpful or hurtful towards their business. But that was the main thing that came up. Logistically, I have no idea if it would work or not. I don't know,
Okay.
but we could explore it.
All right, I definitely think it should be explored, because one of my professional endeavors is working with a lot of the businesses downtown, and to put it lightly, they would appreciate any form of increased footprint.
Yeah.
So I think you would actually have a suggestion on that.
Sounds like maybe we should get you before the Church Street Marketplace Commission for the next meeting. One thing I did want to circle back though is the farmers, and it sounds like you mentioned that the number of farmers applying has kind of diminished in recent years. What's the geographic range? I feel like when I'd come in to do the tour during National Farmers Market Week, I talked to some of the folks, and I feel like some of these folks were coming from like an hour and a half away. Some were coming from the Northeast Kingdom to come here, and to come that far to set up 8 or 9 in the morning. They're getting up probably 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, getting in a car to drive. I mean, that really speaks to me as a Burlington resident, like their commitment to what they do. And I think, want to call that out and recognize that. But what is the geographic reach of the farmers? You like statewide, or is it kind of Chittenden County, or just so many miles, or?
So our only requirement to be in the market is that you have to farm in Vermont. We've had in the past a vendor, I know there was a vendor who would drive 2.5 hours. I believe Trench's Farmhouse, they're no longer at the market. But yeah, we have vendors all over.
And how many vendors? I know we have a limited amount of agricultural land here in city limits down on the Intervale, or at least, we used to back in the day. And I think we still do. How many vendors are actually from Burlington? I think the one that comes to mind is Digger's Mirth, but not sure if they're still operating in Burlington or not.
I do not know that off the top of my head. Honestly, I'm struggling to think of any ag. I mean, well, June Farm, Diggers. Yeah, I think that's it. I think everyone else. Oh no, we have Gourmet Green. Yeah, maybe 3 who are in Chittenden. 3 to 5 if I'm missing some. Yeah. Yeah. So they're coming from a long way. And that's also why a lot more farms are switching to CSA or farm stands, because that's easier for them.
Another option might be to try to tap in and work something out with some of the local hotel and lodging providers here in the downtown. I know we have a wonderful new hotel over on Bank Street and a number of other hotels. The one on the waterfront's getting renovated. We had another one down there. So I think we've got a number of properties. The other thing, maybe try to, since you have such a wide geographic reach, maybe try to work something out where that they can come in the night before, save themselves the drive, and work out a discounted rate or something. That would help the farmers, what they do, and it'd be a little bit more cost, obviously, but if you get enough people involved, you could get a break on the rate too.
Same idea. I think it's just there's so many logistics for keeping everything cool and on a hot day. Yeah, but yeah, I'm open to any and all ideas.
You can always dream, right?
Absolutely.
So before we wrap up this section, any last questions or wants? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad to see that you're talking with Love Burlington. I mean, there has been a real underutilization of our space. We have this short window for like spring, late spring through early fall to have these events. And we could definitely be capitalizing on the traffic between Boston and Montreal. Both cities do a lot of events that we don't do. And just to throw a couple of things out there for thought, you are very correct about balance. The balance of the type of vendors is really important because some of the businesses that had complained in the past, their primary product was food. So they didn't necessarily like a more heavy balance of food trucks. But we also know that the Friday night food truck event during the summer is extremely popular in the city. So I was thinking, why couldn't we have done something on Sunday? Like maybe just an ag market on a Sunday. And I think an after work market, except for not on Tuesday, because Tuesday we have the Old North End Farmers Market. But an after work market that is primarily ag would be great, I think. And I think the downtown businesses would welcome that. If they're also willing to keep their hours later. Some businesses are willing to do that, some weren't. We saw that during the Christmas holiday. I think the businesses that were willing to keep their doors open did pretty well this year. The final numbers will bode for that. And then I guess the other thing is, can the farmers market, do the Saturday market, but also work with what goes on in City Hall to have some vendors there as well? And then do a cross promotion of some sort between the two locations.
Yeah.
And maybe a van to transport people.
If anyone knows.
Thinking.
Yeah, thinking.
Think-
All right.
Good use of NPA funds.
Well, to wrap this up, I would like to thank you, Georgie, for coming out. And taking questions.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, Chris.
And so at 7:30, back on schedule to our next presentation, we have Chief Administrative Officer Catherine Schad.
We're gonna make this an annual thing, I think.
Yes, thank you for inviting me back.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Are one of the friendliest NPAs, and
Good to hear that.
I will just preface this by saying thank you for the invitation, and also I said yes, I would love to come. Before I had talked to the mayor, and you will see me again next month with her. And so this will actually be a great introduction. Tonight we'll talk sort of generally about where we are in the FY27 budgeting process. And then next month, we will talk a little more specifically about items that you will probably see on the town meeting day ballot. So with that, I will pull up this presentation. Just give me 1 second.
I'll just interject here since we have a little bit of space that we do have some flatbread and some water over there. We encourage folks to avail themselves of that.
Yeah, it always helps when you're talking about the budget to not do it on an empty stomach. That is one of my pro tips. I'm just gonna say. All right. We are gonna follow a pretty simple formula tonight. We're gonna go through what the city is projecting that we need for expenses, what we think we have for revenues, where the gap is, and then what we have sort of for options, where we're headed with that. So what the city needs for expenses, you can see here in this kind of handy chart. This is the city's general fund expense budget growing over time. You can see the largest portion of our budget is in blue, and that is the city's personnel, salaries and benefits. You can see in orange, those are our general operating expenses. Sometimes I get a little cheeky and I just call those paper clips. Obviously, we buy a lot more than paper clips, but those are all the tools we need to do our jobs. It does, of course, include paper clips, but a lot more than that goes into there. Green is debt service, and we have that measured specially because there's a dedicated tax. A part of your property tax is specifically for our debt. And then there's the lovely other expenses catch-all category.
Going a little bit more into the weeds, whenever we start budgeting for the next year, we do start with the people because that is the vast majority of our budget. So as we go into next year, July 1st will be our FY27 budget. So we started with this year's personnel budget. We're not planning to add new staff with the exception of 2 new firefighters, which were negotiated in the fire contract. And then we add in what is required by contracts for our cost of living adjustments. You can see that here. Fire is the first one, BFFA. The second one is for police. And then all of our other employees, governed by the AFSCME contract. That contract is up this year, so we don't actually know what the cost of living adjustment will be for next year. So we have used a conservative estimate, and our non-union employees follow AFSCME. So that's a pretty big chunk of employees that we're not exactly sure what the COLA, as we call it, will be next year. So we're kind of doing our best. This page talks mostly about benefits. And one of the important things to note here is that we don't have finalized costs for our healthcare at this point. You have probably heard in the news about healthcare costs going crazy, the Affordable Care Act, things going on with UVM, Blue Cross. That affects the city too. We are self-insured. And because we are actually not even quite halfway through this fiscal year, which started on July 1st, we don't have quite accurate numbers. What we're going to pay next year is based on our usage this year. So it's a very large percentage of our budget are these employer healthcare costs, and that's a little bit of a mystery, but we are estimating that. Then we get to my so-called paper clips, and there is inflation for some of those operating costs. We try and hold that as level as we can. But the big thing here is really, I started in the city just before COVID in 2020, and we have not purchased or replaced any vehicles in the general fund since then. And in my research, we have been constrained with the replacement of vehicles since 2013. And that is really coming to a head for our police and fire. This might not resonate, but I feel like this is the right age group. I joke that the police, unfortunately, our police officers are running around in Flintstone cars because they've been repaired so much, and we repair them over at DPW on Pine Street. But that cost benefit analysis is really not making sense anymore. So we've got to have 6 new vehicles for police and fire. And so that adds about $800,000 to the budget for next year. Then we look at what do we have for money coming in. This chart, which is a little small, shows how much money we get from the grand list. The grand list is how we assess property tax, and about half of all of our general fund revenue comes from property taxes. The problem is, if you recall seeing the cost of living adjustments that we're giving and those high percentages, and then you contrast that with the fact that our grand list is only growing at 1%, you start to see the problem. And that's really what that chart is showing. The other piece here is that we have included over the past many years some one-time funding in our budget. And of course, if you include one-time funding, like in this year's budget, you've got to zero that out and then either cut those expenses or find replacement revenue. This year includes the very end of the ARPA funding, and that's a little more than $1 million. And then you'll see on this slide, there's some additional one-time revenues or revenues that were historically included in our budget that we have not met. And so that's about $4 million when you add this all up, of revenue that we have in this year's budget that we do not expect next year. So again, our two choices are either to find a new source of revenue or to cut $4 million of those expenses. So the big picture here is that at this time, we have a budget gap of between $10 and $12 million. For context, our general fund budget is about $107 million. So we're at about a 10% gap at this point. As I mentioned, I'm working closely with all of our department heads to update their budgets. We're also working to nail down those health and retirement numbers so that we have a more precise number for you. So we know exactly, is it 10 million? Is it 10.5 and so on? So our options for meeting this need, we're not in a unique position. It might not make us feel that much better, but it just takes a quick Google to see that there are big and small cities everywhere facing these challenges. And we're not going to get through this with just one size fits all or just one approach. We will certainly need a mix of both cutting expenses and raising revenues. And if you are interested, I will be presenting, this is sort of part one of the discussion. Part two will happen at the Board of Finance next Monday. One option we do intend to pursue is a 5-cent increase to the police and fire tax. I mentioned briefly that there are several different dedicated taxes within what we think of as the property tax. And so just to make sure everyone is operating with the same information, when you get your property tax bill, 2/3 of that goes directly to the state for education. Doesn't have anything to do with me or the city, but that other third is what we're talking about here with the municipal property tax. Within that 1/3, we actually have 15 separate individual taxes that make up the municipal property tax. One of the ones that's they're all very important, but is police and fire. And you can see here currently that police and fire tax raises about $6.5 million. The budgets for those departments are $39 million. So that tax is raising only 16% of the cost of those services. And the cost of those services, if you also remember from that first slide, the costs are going up dramatically. We've got, I'm just going to go back here so we can see it. We've got a 7% cost of living increase for fire, and we've got almost 5% for police, and we're also adding some new staff for fire. So that is a big part of the reason why we are targeting this police and fire tax. We recognize that, that community safety and those departments are the two most critical services that the city provides, but they are also huge cost drivers for the city. A little bit more, you can see here, this is the history of the municipal tax over the past few years. And the column all the way on the right shows the increase. The column in the middle shows the total municipal tax on a home that is at the current median assessed value. So that means half of the people will pay less than that, half of the property owners pay more than that. The important thing to note on this slide, which has a lot of words, is that regardless of whether we approve a 5-cent increase for police and fire, taxes are expected to go up next year because the debt tax and the retirement, these two splinter taxes, by charter can go up without a vote of the people. So we expect taxes to go up a minimal amount to cover those anyway. And this chart shows exactly what that difference would be. And so, you know, regardless, we're looking at about a 3.5% increase. And then if the 5-cent increase were to be also approved, then we're looking at about a 9% increase. We are actively pursuing other options. We have first started focusing on the police and fire tax, not because it is easy, not because I like telling people their taxes are going to go up, but because ballots go out about a month from now. They will go out between February 9th and 11th. And in order to make that deadline, our friends at the city council have to decide if this is a question that will even go on the ballot. And they have to decide that by the end of January. So there's a deadline about that tax question. And then there are lots of other options on here. As I mentioned, we're really looking at a complete package of options here. And so you'll start to hear about these things on Monday night at the Board of Finance. But we have asked each department to propose to me and the mayor cuts of both 5% and 10%. And that applies to everyone in the general fund. We have just started going through those proposals. They would, in some cases, involve potential staff cuts and service reductions. So obviously those will need some public input. They'll need some city council input. We've also talked to employees about an early retirement or a voluntary furlough program. Leveraging city assets is a better way to say, should we sell any of our city property? And this is a touchy subject. And because it's only one bullet here, I will just caveat it by saying, it's not like we're going to sell City Hall or 645 Pine. We're not talking about any buildings that are currently occupied. It would probably be surprising to you, because it was to me, that there's several actually vacant pieces of land that the city owns that could perhaps be turned into housing or other developments. And so that's a conversation, again, for city council of, we might want to hold on to those for strategic reasons. Maybe one or two of them are things that would be better served by disposing of them. So that's a conversation we'll have. We are working very hard not to rely on one-time revenues, but we'll talk about that again. And then an interesting one here, and we've explored this a little bit over the past couple of years, is really since COVID, you know, the city's pretty decentralized. And so we've got maybe not as much consistency across the city as I, as the CAO, would like to see in terms of collecting when someone owes the city money, whether it be for an overdue parking ticket, a building permit or anything else, different departments have different ways of following up and collecting that money or not. And so we're at the beginning of exploring how much money might be, so to speak, on the table and could still be collectible, and what would be required to go collect that money. We certainly don't want people owing us and having it out there when there's a gap. So that's important. So, quick summary, and then I'm happy to take questions. We do have a $10 to $12 million gap. We are looking at many of the, we will employ, I think, many of these various approaches, certainly raising revenue and cutting expenses. We hope to have a question on the ballot about the tax increase. We'll be back next month. And then many of you have probably become aware of the budget presentations that happen in May. They're pretty detailed. We go department by department. We're moving those up to the beginning of April so that we really can engage with City Council and make sure that we have enough time to really weigh some of those options I was talking about with any potential cuts. Because while the mayor and I draft the budget, the City Council approves it, and that does have a hard deadline of June 30th. And that's all I've got, and I would love to hear comments or take questions.
I've been a little concerned about the amount of people that go on a call for a fire call or an ambulance call for. I have two experiences with that. About 3 years ago, my wife had a seizure at Burlington Market. I was driving home at the time, and when I arrived, there was a fire truck and ambulance there with her for about 20 or 30 minutes, and I counted 7 people there for a seizure that she was out of in 30 seconds. Yesterday, I was moving furniture out of my office building at 86 St. Paul Street. The elevator broke while we were in loading, and the management called the fire department, and 7 firemen came up to get 4 of us out of the elevator. And it just seemed like there's an over amount of people doing those service calls when it may not really be all that necessary. When we were in Montpelier, my wife did have seizures as well, and then an ambulance came with maybe 2 or 3 people. I'm also concerned that I hear that South Burlington has a surplus of money because they have a huge amount of money coming in from building permits. And I don't see that Burlington has enough money coming in from building permits. The state charges permits fees. But I think that we could look at increasing building permit fees because it can be a very attractive place to build in Burlington as we become a healthier and more economically sound city. And I think we should look at perhaps increasing the cost of getting a building permit fee for buildings. Not that you need one for a little teeny projects, but when you're doing a major building, I think that there could be some revenue there that could benefit the public.
Any other questions?
Charlie? Is there any mention of Memorial Auditorium? I think there's quite a schism. There were many public input meetings which I attended. Everyone had reverence for the building and wanted to keep it. The city wanted to discount it. They wanted to let it fall apart. Well, of course, it's no older than City Hall, but hasn't been tended to as well. And it seemed that the city would rather take it out like a bad tooth and put in something ugly and modern instead. And there would be no community center and no club in the basement for the kids to go to. Jim Lockridge just passed away recently, RIP. And it kept people off the street. It was famous all over the US. They were very successful. And the kids got to let out some steam, and they didn't even do any graffiti. They were busy dancing over there or jumping up and down, whatever you call it. But that was a very important thing. Having a community is something the internet knows nothing about. And you know who's been winning. But we are a community, and we should be a community. And Memorial Auditorium, if it's too wrecked, we should build a replica right where it is.
Mark?
Yeah, I want to say just thank you for this. I've been to a lot of these, as you know, and I thought this was one of the most useful presentations in terms of framing the whole discussion that I've seen in any of these. And I look forward to the discussions we will be having starting at the Board of Finance on Monday. And I encourage people to follow along with that as well, where we'll get into some of these ideas on additional revenues and cost savings. So yeah, it's going to be another challenging budget year, but we'll get it done somehow. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me?
Brooks, proceed.
Thank you. So, little off topic. So Emma is a Ward 3 resident, and she, as far as I've been doing, the NPA has not shown up. And I understand Joe Kane's issue, but it would be good if she would show up at an NPA meeting, because I'm starting to disbelieve the relevancy of an NPA. So I know that's off topic and all that, but if you could bring that back to her and say, because when we brought up a resolution to move the OPC out of Ward 3, when I talked to her at one of her Friday, fourth Friday things, she was like, well, if I've been there, I would have voted against it. Well, okay. So, she's a busy woman, but if these NPAs are legitimate, then she should be taking part in them.
I think there might be a bigger point here about the mayor's role in NPAs, and I'm not sure what that is, but you may not have heard at the beginning of my presentation, I did announce that we have confirmed that the mayor will be at this meeting next month.
Yes, I heard that, but that's
Okay,
the first time. That's the first time, and I've only been on the steering committee for, I don't know, 5 or 6 months, and I've written her several times and gotten no response. So that'll be good. I'll make sure I'm there so I can quiz her on her points of contact. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooks. Do we have any other questions in the audience? Mila?
Thank you. Not as much of a question, but just a reminder for people that are not on the mayor's email list. Now is a really crucial time to get on that email list. She recently sent out information, some of which was also covered in that email on the FY27 budget. And that's an excellent way to get information if you don't have time to watch Board of Finance or City Council meetings. And also for the mayor meetups, now that the holidays are over, the mayor meetups will be going back to their regular schedule. And next Tuesday at 5:30 will be for Central District, which is virtual. There are 2 mayor meetups that occur in the mornings at 8 o'clock, and and that's North and South District. And then the East District occurs at noon on its date, and that is a hybrid. So there's different options to be able to talk to the mayor and get information directly from the mayor as well. Thank you.
And I just want to build on what Councilor Grant had said. The mayor's, it's been a while since I've got one because I changed my email address, but the information in the newsletter is very helpful. It's very thorough. There's a lot of good stuff in there to kind of keep if you want to get plugged into the city. So.
All right, to get back onto the original topic at hand here, do we have any questions for CA Yoshad regarding the city's budget and its future? All right. Charlie?
So hello, I'm Charlie from Ward 2. One thing that I'm curious about are what are some of the larger liabilities for capital needs for the city in the near future or in the distant future? For instance, we just had a big high school capital improvement. We just had, there's a lot of talk about the water department, water and sewage department. There's talk about the Memorial Auditorium. So what are some of the larger things that people are going to be asked to fund, some of the larger responsibilities in the coming future?
That is a great question because what we've talked about here are really just the operational costs and not those big capital costs. So thank you, Charlie. I don't have a great answer tonight, but what I will say is keep abreast of these budget conversations because they will include capital. I can say after approving the big water bonds and before that, the high school, we are not planning to come with another big ask this year. And I should not lock myself in, but I don't suspect next year either. And some of that is because the city has a policy around how much debt that we can have. And that is both the city's debt and then technically the school district. What we've done with the high school is sort of in a separate but related bucket. And we're not totally maxed out on our quote unquote credit card, like if we're thinking about it like in our personal finances, but we're getting close to that upper of our credit limit. And so we're going to just pay off what we've done with both water and with the high school and with just some of our general obligation bonds. It wasn't too long ago that you approved a $23 million bond for the regular needs of the city, like fixing Fire Station 1. It had windows that were so bad that firefighters were being snowed on. And we had a floor on the fire station that was toxic and had to be totally redone. So there's all sorts of just the general needs of the city so that something doesn't happen like Memorial. You know, that happened because there wasn't enough capital money to just maintain important city buildings. So I think what I have heard from this mayor is that we are at this point trying to take care of what we have rather than as much as there are people who would really like a replica of Memorial or to redo, like we don't have the money for all of that right now. So what we're going to try and do is focus on taking care of the assets that we have. And within that, you know, we have approximately a $24 million bond to spend over 3 years. So you can do the math. We've got about $8 million a year. And one of those presentations in April will be, what are we going to do with that $8 million this year? What have we done this past year? And so you'll start to see those projects. You know, some of them might be in parks, police, like they're all over. And those are good things to keep track of. So thank you. And we'll keep that conversation going.
All right, let's say do we have one more question for
Right. What is the proverbial credit limit for our proverbial credit card, and what is our proverbial utilization at this time? And does the city council have the ability to vote to raise the quote unquote debt ceiling?
The last one is the easiest, and yes, they do, with a policy change. The other questions are more complicated because it's not like, it's not as easy as like, we got a $10,000 thing and we're at 9,000. But that is something I'm happy to come back to next month, because it will just require kind of a quick chart. What it is it's a percentage of the tax revenue that we bring in. And it's up to a certain amount of the city's operating expenses. Then it's a certain amount of the city plus the school, because we're all, it's one tax base. And so we have lots of interesting graphs and charts. And I think it wasn't too long ago we presented that to the Board of Finance. So I'll dig that up and bring some more precise numbers next month.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Brooks, you're the last one.
Okay. So what's your view on BHS when they redefined PCB levels? So the Vermont, whoever in Vermont came up and said, the PCB levels are way too low or way too high. We're going to tear the school down. Then they went back through the schools in the state and said, oh gosh, we can't afford this. And then they went back to the federal levels. So now we're into a $165 million school that it is what it is because they push it into the ground.
I don't think that that is a question that I am able to respond to from a technical perspective. I don't know about PCBs. I'm the finance person, and I was able to figure out how we could afford to borrow the $165 million. But unfortunately, I am not a person who has that kind of expertise. I don't know if anyone else does.
I'm happy to take a crack. Essentially, once the school was declared toxic, there was no way we could put students back into it, even after the state, after we had torn the school down, I think, or we're in the process of tearing the school down, they actually reduced or they raised the level of PCBs that were allowable as they started to figure out that other schools in the state were having a problem. I think we were like 40 times lower than like the EPA standard or something, but it was what it was. And like CAO Shad said, it wasn't really a city decision, it was a state decision. And we were impacted by it in the city of Burlington. The good news is we're gonna have the high school that needed to be at least partially renovated, if not entirely renovated. They ran into a lot of issues as they got into it, but we were already in for over $70 million when we started this for a partial rehab. So we're going to brand new school. Hopefully it will serve us for another 50 years. And with some of the housing policies and things we're going to have in the city, hopefully we'll be able to fill it full of students. But yeah, this was just a byproduct of state policy more than it was any decision of the city or the school district, really.
I'm just worried about being snowed on other things like the memorial block and everything else that we have to do this. This is really important and all that kind of stuff. We're $10 to $12 million underwater. It's like, well, is due diligence being done such that we really understand what the ramifications are? So that's neither here nor there.
I believe on the school, it was done and it was done 2 or 3 times. And we were just in a situation where the city's the state's biggest city, we have to have a high school for our kids, and we didn't have one. And with where our kids are and now was temporary and always was meant to be temporary. So we're sort of between a rock and a hard place, I guess, in some ways, but we had to do something about the high school.
All right,
And I just want,
I was gonna say, we do need to move on to the
10 minutes
next
past,
topic.
yeah.
For 10 minutes past, we have another
Sure.
city employee who's generous with their time, Milo.
Yep,
I'm going to
I'll
turn
be
it over to
really
city
quick, but
planning.
this is really important. I do want to say, agree completely with what Council Barlow said. When the superintendent was meeting with the state and he was meeting with the experts that were determining the safety levels that would be acceptable in schools, he said that he asked them point blank, would they allow their children to go there? And they didn't say yes.
All right. Thank you to everyone who has spoken on the matter. We are moving on to PlanBTV and fencing regulations. Thank you for being so accommodating. Sarah Turner?
Sir?
Sarah Turner?
Sarah Morgan.
Sarah Morgan, my bad. Pardon me.
A lot of Sarahs at the city. We love getting each other's emails.
All right. So, yeah, but feel free to go ahead.
I do need to be made a co-host on Zoom to share some slides. Great, thank you. And thanks to everyone who's sticking around. There's no better time to talk about downtown fences than after 8 o'clock in this room. Sorry, Zoom's taking a minute. I also want to thank one of our Planning Commission Ordinance Committee members who's also here, who's been here since 4 o'clock when our meeting started? Great. All right, here we go. I'm really glad to be here today talking about zoning amendment 2602, Burlington's downtown form code fence amendment. I'll try and get through this quick, but the purpose of this amendment, if anyone's not familiar, is that we've had a lot of communications from downtown business owners, residents, also downtown employees, service providers who face a lot of challenges related to public health and safety in our different alleyways and service areas downtown. And due to the rigidity of our downtown form code or Article 14, we've had some requests from different counselors, business owners, as well as the Development Review Board, who have requested an amendment that allows for more flexibility for taller fences in a very specific part of the form code in our downtown districts. We have had about 6 meetings since September with different, with our Planning Commission, with our Planning Commission Ordinance Committee. I was thankful to be at the Church Street Marketplace Commission before the holidays talking about this. This just kind of outlines the various conversations that these bodies have had, and that we want to be very thorough and sensitive with this amendment. I also want to provide a little bit of background on what I mean by form district. So a form district is a type of zoning that regulates development by focusing on the physical form, scale, and character of buildings. And this is different from a typical zoning district, which really focuses on more land use regulation. So these 2 pink areas that are between Main Street and north of downtown and kind of stretch along Lake Street. These are form districts. We have 2 of them, Form District 5 and 6. And just for reference, that star is where you are at City Hall. This is the Ward 3 boundary that I just wanted to include for reference, much of which is the form district. We're going to be talking about different lot layers in this, and I want to provide some context of what I mean by the first lot layer. The yellow is up front is this property and frontage line. And this is the red in the facade of the principal building. Thank you to Champlain Leather for not emailing me yet, asking me not to use their building as an example for this. I have seen or heard no requests from them about fences and alleys, so please don't call them asking about it. This is a neutral location, but in that green, this green arrow is what the first lot layer is. It is between the property or frontage line and the facade of that principal building. We have 3 lot layers. That first one, following that first one, there's 20 feet back until you get to the 3rd lot layer. The first one is what's important for today. these are the definitions, and thank you for, I did get the slides to Chris, I believe at 6:05 or so, shortly after Catherine. So these should be available online. But the initial scope of this amendment really focused on the height of fences in the downtown. The amendment initially looks at increasing allowable height from 4 feet to 6 feet. And fences in the first lot layer are not allowed to be currently are not allowed to be chain link or welded wire along any frontage line. You might see this as you are walking around downtown. There are several non-conforming, non-compliant fences that have gone up. There are some other considerations. There's allowances for alternative compliance, and also there's some additional limitations on height related to public safety, construction sites, etc. I'm not going to get too far into the alternative compliance, but we do have this allowance in the form code that allows any numerical standard to increase by no more than 20%, provided that various findings are made based on, I believe, these 5 different criteria. So that can be granted. Anyway, another topic related to fences that has come up is the materials. So there is a significant difference between a fence that is made of, let's say, aluminum, a wrought iron, things like that, and a chain link fence or one made of welded wire. We also acknowledge that there is an interest in allowing for chain link and welded wire in very specific circumstances. One of the reasons that the Planning Commission's Ordinance Committee and Planning Commission really thought long and hard about this is that we don't want downtown to be very closed off with a lot of fences. The goal of the Downtown Forum Code is to really have a welcoming, pedestrian-centered experience, and we really want to take a light prescriptive touch with this. So there is I'll get into it in a minute, but there were 3 scenarios that were discussed over the last several months. So the initial scenario kind of started, point A was, should fences 6 feet in height, not made of chain link or welded wire, be allowed in the first lot layer anywhere in the downtown Forum District? That was 1. So you can see on the left what that would have allowed. It would not have allowed chain link, but that one on the left would have been in the first lot layer anywhere in the downtown Forum District. Again, between that building facade and the property line. Scenario 2 was that fences 6 feet in height, not made of chain link, are allowed in the first lot layer anywhere in the downtown Forum District, and chain link or welded wire may be used if they are enclosing alleyways or loading docks. There was hesitation in this one followed by the commission really considering if the intent is really to focus on these service areas, and if there's the achievement of allowing this in alleyways and loading docks, do we really need 6 feet elsewhere? And so that got us to this final scenario that as of 5 today is what is warned for a public hearing by the commission next Tuesday, in which fences 6 feet in height are allowed only if they are used to enclose an alleyway or loading dock within an alleyway. Chain link or welded wire may be used along the frontage line if they are located in alleyways or loading docks within alleyways. So really focused on allowing this only related to alleyways or the service areas that are located within alleyways. So this is you might see that this language was warned with a consideration of recessed entryways. One of the discussions that was happening today at 4 was whether or not to consider fencing in recessed entryways, which is recommended by the Planning Commission Ordinance Committee to be pulled from that public hearing, which the commission had looked for their direction on. So wanted to clarify that, any confusion there. And told you I'd be as fast as I could on that, but happy to answer any questions that anyone might have or revisit any slides.
Charlie?
So why the discrimination against chain link fence? What's the issue with chain link fence?
We want to be very careful in how chain link might impact the pedestrian experience of downtown. One of the reasons that we are allowing for chain link is because we want to acknowledge that zoning might not necessarily be the only or really best tool to be navigating a lot of the public health and safety concerns that are being faced by a lot of our downtown residents and business owners and visitors. And we are hopeful that this is a relatively temporary situation downtown. And if we do allow for the chain link, it is more likely that it will be eventually removed. If we require 6-foot aluminum, high investment, high financial investment, I mean, it would be less likely to be taken down. But to answer your original question, concerns about the downtown feel and wanting to make sure that there is still a welcoming environment, especially in that first lot layer.
So the horrible looking fencing that we have downtown now, so you say it's going to be taken down. Why are they putting it up if it's going to be taken down?
There's a lot of fencing up in various locations.
So on College Street, there's chain link fencing that blocks off the alleyway. So it's there. So why would they be taking it down in the future?
This is just an instance in which it would be more likely for someone to take it down in the future than if it was like a $5,000 fence than a $15,000 fence. We would like for our alleyways and service areas to be a lot more welcoming to visitors, to residents, but acknowledging that loading docks and service areas do serve a need for a lot of our business community, and we want to make sure that we are supporting in the public health and safety.
So you're saying that if at any time in the future the crime and drug situation changes, they may take down the fencing, is what you're saying?
We would love to see that happen. And I would say it would be more likely for that to happen with a...
Because the little bit of fencing now around town looks horrible. You know, the building, the Leahy building's got 4-inch fencing that doesn't do anything. You just hop over it, you know, and then it doesn't even enclose the building because it has to have an opening for people that have disabilities to get in. So it was like a waste of money. So it seems like a lot of fencing is just going to be a waste of money, you know, that could be spent somewhere else.
One thing I also do want to note, just related to the way that we regulate fencing, is that state and federal buildings are not subject to these same standards and are exempt from these the chain link limitations. But just wanted to note that.
Thank you. Thank you for making that note, because that's been part of the overall issue in terms of the inconsistencies that they're allowed to do. And then when our businesses and property owners do something similar, many times, because I've heard like, oh, well, we saw this here, so we thought that was okay. So in this process where I've given some feedback and worked with some local business owners and property owners, my main concerns have been we don't educate people enough as to the guidelines that they should be following, because people are putting up fencing only to be taken to task later for not having built them according to code because they didn't know what the code was, and they were trying to handle a situation where they literally had vendors refusing to use the loading docks because of the issues that were occurring. There are definitely some of the fences that aren't, like the old Roxy building, that owner slapped up a very large fence that's very noticeable. One of the things that I've been concerned about how this conversation has come out, and I guess not really because we're already kind of running behind schedule, so not up for a discussion, but something for people to think about, is I hear and I do respect the opinions and the concerns that, okay, some of this fencing isn't good to look at. I don't think a lot of our visitors necessarily notice them unless they're the larger ones. But what they do notice is where there isn't that added security, they notice the smell. That's what people notice, and that's what business and property owners are trying to prevent. We still have issues where we don't have anywhere near sufficient public bathrooms in our downtown area. And given the number of unhoused people in our community, they are areas that unfortunately end up with a lot of garbage, a lot of human waste as well. And it's the smell that people comment on a lot. Thank you.
One note I will make is I know that a lot of the occupants of downtown, especially on the first floor, might not necessarily own that structure, might not necessarily be the primary contacts with our permitting office. And I can't recommend reaching out to our permitting team enough, even if you are not the owner of that property, just if you want to ask questions, anything like that. I think, there's definitely a gap in the landlord of a property, maybe not, maybe having education, but not with the direct business. So I can definitely see some of the knowledge gaps there.
One other comment. I just want on the committee that discussed this today. And I think we landed well because what we're trying to do is to really protect people from dangers in the alleyways that are blocked off or the loading dock areas. At the same time, we want to keep it very aesthetic to not have any fencing on the recessed entries that are main entrances to buildings. I was concerned that we exempt or the state exempts themselves from our requirements. I would like to encourage the city of Burlington to encourage the state to follow our plan on this. I think we're way ahead of them on how this really works and should work. And I don't think it'd be very difficult for them to agree to our standards, that it would make it much easier for our people to know that it's not a double standard. The state can do what they want, but they have to do what the city wants. I think we should encourage the state to follow our example.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Sarah?
Yeah. I presume that the chain link fence is a whole lot cheaper than anything else. It looks like it. The worst would be those orange things that have cuts in them. They're an industrial waste thing that's become a fence. Orange, that's the only uglier one. But it's I mean, you have to keep people out of the alleys, and the smell, the hiding away. It's not their space, but it's not quite public, especially if somebody stands blocking the way. They can feel that it's their private place for a minute. But these keep some places inaccessible, and many I see. I mean, I live right on College Street, around the corner from the park, and it's obvious that people have had problems. First, you see clothing, and you see people, and then you see fences, and until we can solve the homelessness thing, we cannot make it look like the beautiful European city of 100 years ago, which would be what we would like. We do what we can. Yes, chain link. I understand that 6 feet would make it harder to jump over and see over.
I mean, since we're talking about the alleyways downtown and College Street, where there is a park and there are police, to me, policing the alleyway makes a whole lot more sense than putting up an ugly fence. They walk around that way, walk through the alleyway. Then we don't have to have fences, That's just an opinion.
All right. Anyone else? There you go. Sarah, do you have any closing comments?
We'll have our planning commission public hearing next Tuesday, so you're welcome to email me with any written communications or attend next Tuesday, this location, 6:30. And then it will make its way through the city council adoption process.
All right. Thank you very much for staying late and for your time. Now we are going to move into public forum. So if Anybody, if anyone is interested to come sit up here and speak about topics relating or unrelating to the agenda.
Hi, thanks. I'm another Sarah Rose. And I have a specific safety concern. And I wasn't really sure where to lay this, but I thought I'd start with my community representatives. I currently live on North Winooski between the block of Pearl and Grant. Early last spring, 2025, I stepped outside my front door before 7 a.m. to agents with rifles, balaclavas, and bulletproof vests. I heard through the grapevine that they were raiding the house on 42 North Winooski. After the raid, the house was boarded up, cleaned out, and a cursory keep out sign placed, but it did not stay unoccupied for long. In a matter of days, the place was occupied again. I've rented at this residence for the last 3 years, and I have seen my current residence, and I have seen a lot of people coming in and out of 42 North Winooski, waiting on the stoop in various stages of visible intoxication. There has been no effort I have seen by whoever owns this building to properly board and maintain security of the premises. I would like to make it clear that I am a person in active recovery. I've been sober for many years. I've worked in recovery in the past. My frustration lies squarely with the owners of this building. The shooting that took place on December 22nd only tells me that this situation is escalating. And I'd like to add, as a side note, there was a house in a similar state on the corner of Grant and North Union. That house was boarded up for months while cleaned out, freshly painted, and now properly occupied. I've heard that this is a building that is owned by Champlain Housing. But regardless, this stands as proof that a safe cleanup can be accomplished in my community. As a neighborhood mostly comprised of students, a few older folks, and some of color like myself, I feel like our safety has been overlooked on this block. And I would like to implore accountability to be taken by the owners of the property. And I appreciate your consideration and any further guidance as to how I can get this issue move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing. I do believe that Counselor Grant would be the one to help you out. All right. Any other? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Debbie Krugi-Pudi. I'm running for Inspector of Elections in Ward 3. And I'm looking for signatures of folks that live in Ward 3 to get me on the ballot. So if you live in Ward 3 and you want to sign for me, I can tell you I've worked at a lot of elections with Charlie, trained by Charlie over here. I like working at elections, and they needed an inspector, so I was stepping up. Thanks.
How many signatures do you have present?
Right now I have 11. I need 30.
All right, well, let's get Debbie's signatures. Let's get around to the ballot. Thank you.
Woo.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, actually, yeah, please come up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Sanchez Parkinson. It's really nice to see many of you here. And I will follow on Debbie, also preparing our campaign to run for City Council in our Ward 3. Many of you might have attended the Progressive Nomination Caucus, and so you've heard a little bit about my background and why I would like to run. I've been here with my family for about 3 years. We live on Front Street. We have 2 kiddos on Sustainability Academy. And really also, Sarah, appreciate you sharing your experience because I think that is for many of us who are longtime renters, it is really helpful for our voices to be heard and to be able to feel safe in our home. So I'm also gathering those signatures. Deadline is at the end of this month. And so if you want to learn more about why I'm running or the issues I care about, I'm happy to stick around and chat more. Thank you.
Say your name again, please.
Laura Sanchez Parkinson.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Do we have any other comments for public forum? Yeah, I don't know. You look at me.
Thanks everyone for coming out tonight. You know, you have plenty of different things you could have done on a Wednesday night, but you chose to be here with us at the NPA. So thank you for that. Just want to reiterate for I think the second or third time, I think as Councilor Grant did, the mayor will be joining us next month to present on the number of the ballot questions. And I think Councilor Grant, you had requested REIB ballot question. We'll probably be having you come back for that. But also we'll be having the traditional candidate forum to go along with that as well. So we'll be providing an opportunity for folks running for city council and school board to talk to us in a little more depth about their views for the city moving forward. But in the meantime, thank you for coming out tonight.
That brings our meeting to a close. Thank you, everybody.